Hey Maestro users, this tutorial is going to teach you all about the show page and how to make a show in Maestro. We're going to cover the trigger effect buttons, we're going to cover show mode versus live mode and how they interact with each other. We're also going to teach you how to build a show from cues across all of the fixture groups that you can use for your lighting. Cues are comprised of patterns, color palettes, effects palettes, and a number of parameters that you can fiddle around with to dial in your effects. On top of that, we're going to show you how to create multiple shows, how to download them and upload them if you need to save them, and in general how to use your shows and how to trigger them from an external MIDI controller or by using OSC or Open Sound Control. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so here I have the Maestro app open. I'm connected from my laptop to the Maestro unit over Ethernet, and I'm going right out of my laptop with an adapter and an Ethernet cable right into the back of Maestro into its Ethernet input, ensuring that I have a solid connection. I've gone to maestro.local to bring up the app, and I'm clicking on the show page here. Over here, I've got a virtualized DMX stage running in the Capture software. We'll talk a little bit about that stage in a bit. So as you can see on the show page, currently everything is grayed out and I can't actually control anything. And that's because I have no fixtures loaded on my stage. So the first thing to ensure is that you have an active stage running on your Maestro. So I'm going to click on stage over here. As you can see, there's no fixtures on the default stage. I'm actually going to load a stage that I made previously. So to do that, click here, add stage. I'm going to, rather than add new, I'm going to restore from a backup. Click right here. And then here's the stage I want to use. I'm going to load it. So now you can see that once the stage is loaded, all of the lights on my virtual stage light up and you can see them all. So let's go through this stage so you've got a bit of an understanding how I set it up. If I go over to Patcher, you can see all the fixtures that I've patched in onto the stage and all the channel ranges that those fixtures take up. Over here on the layout, I can see my fixture groups. So I've got my 4 fixture groups. I've renamed them. So the first fixture group is called Mac Movers. To rename it, I just hit this pencil icon and I can change it to whatever I want to, but we'll leave it as it is. So the first fixture group is made up of a bunch of Martin Mac Mover fixtures. And you can see those. These are the fixtures with the white ellipses on the floor. So as you can see, my first fixture in my pixel layout is the last one. My second fixture is actually the second one, so that's in the right spot. My third fixture, is actually the first fixture. So first what I want to do is I want to lay out the fixtures left to right. So that's the 4th fixture that I just clicked on. So I'm going to rename it number 4 and I'm going to drag it to the bottom so it's on the far right. And then the next fixture, if I solo it, is actually in the 2nd position. So I'm going to call this one 2 and move it to the 2nd position. And now this top fixture is in fact the first fixture, so I've got it correctly mapped. I'm mapping left to right, where the first fixture is the one on the left. So I'll call that 1, and then we'll call this one 3. So now you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. They are now laid out or pixel mapped in a line left to right. It's very important that you remember to map the fixtures on your stage, otherwise the effects just won't look as good. So let's move on to a second fixture group. I've got these ACL movers here. They're up top. You can see I've already mapped them and already labeled them 1 to 4. There you go. So they're mapped left to right. On my third group, I've got some other movers that are wash movers, and I've already mapped them left to right, and I've named them. And on the fourth group, I've got these static wash lights that are also mapped 1 through 6 from left to right, as you can see there. And the next thing to make sure that you've got set up correctly is your audio input. Otherwise, MaestroDMX will definitely not work properly. Go over to System, click on Audio, and as you can see right now, there's no audio coming into the system. I'm going to play some audio, and you're going to see it coming in. You can't hear the audio at the moment, but you can see that the input level is coming into the unit. And you want to make sure that this level is green when the song is running. It might dip a little below green and turn blue if it's a quieter moment of the song, but in general, you want this level to be green. You want that activity level to be moving around. And if the music has a kick drum, then you want the kick drum detector to be picking up those kick triggers. So yes, very important that your audio is set up. For a deeper dive into audio setup, please watch the Getting Started video. So now that our stage and our audio is set up, we're going to go over to the show page. All right, so here's the show page. Right at the top, you have global brightness, which simply just dims all the fixtures on the stage. Below that, we have our effect trigger buttons, which I'm not going to get into because that is explained in the Getting Started video. I do encourage you to watch that if you haven't already to learn how they work. But in general, we have a strobe, a blackout, a blinder, fog control, and then an effect pattern, which can be connected to any DMX channel you choose. All right, so as you see over here, we've got kind of these two zones. We have live control on this side, and then we have the show on this side. Right now I'm running the default show, and I'm running this first cue named static 1, which I made, and you can tell it's playing because the pause head is activated. And you can also see down here in the transport controls that static 1 is in fact playing. There is a number of cues in this show, and I can just play those cues by hitting these play buttons. And if I click here on this Techno Glimmer cue, you can see that the live control now shows you all the contents of that cue. As soon as I move any of the parameters or any of the settings in live control, like this, the show stops playing, and now we are just going to perpetually run in live control, as it states down here, and just whatever's in live control is going out to the lights. So you can quickly see what this cue named Techno Glimmer is made out of. So on the Mac Movers group, we have this pattern called Maestro Dance. We have this color palette, solid color and rainbow. And that is a color palette group comprised of individual palettes. We have no effects palette connected. We have these settings on the parameters. And down here we have some advanced parameters, which we'll get into later. And for the ACL movers group, we have a different set of parameters. We also have the same dance pattern. There is a different color palette group and some parameters. And then if I jump over to wash movers, it's a Maestro still pattern, purple thermometer color palette. And if I go over to the static wash group, it's again running the Maestro still pattern, solid color and rainbow color palette group, no effects palette, and here are the parameters. That shows you in a high level how this Techno Glimmer cue is made. And later on, we'll get into the details of all those parts of a cue. So currently I'm running the default show, but I can jump to another show. So let's see this corporate show, and it's now loaded this show with a different 6 cues called the corporate show. So as you can see, I've got 4 shows here. These shows are all available to you for free as a user. A lot of you will probably only see the default show. If you want to get the corporate show, the all-night dance floor show, and the rock concert show, I'll show you how to do that. So you're going to go to our support page, maestro.com/support. Go to the software updates page, and there you'll see free MaestroDMX curated shows. And you can click these and download them onto your device and then upload them onto Maestro. So to do that, you're just going to go here, add show, restore from backup, click here or drag here to load that show. Okay, let's talk about how a cue is put together. There's quite a lot of information here, so bear with me. So let's look at this Techno Glimmer cue again. You can see now it's loaded in live control because I played it in the show. And then I'm going to nudge this parameter, and now I'm just in live control. So I have 4 fixture groups. I've named them Mac movers, ACL movers, wash movers, and static washes. And I can navigate to these fixture groups here, and I can see all these parameters change. So first of all, let's talk about patterns. Patterns really are at the heart of MaestroDMX and its ability to send lighting data out to the stage. There are 2 types of patterns. There are Maestro patterns. Start with the word Maestro, as you see here. And there are core patterns. Maestro patterns are autonomous, intelligent patterns that react to music and put out lighting data based on the contents of the music. It listens to the rhythm and the beat in the music. It listens to the energy of the music and to the transitions in the music and tracks it over time. We have a number of Maestro patterns. They are named still, beam, ambient, chill, energetic, dance, and party in ascending order of excitement level. So still would be the most chill, or rather the most relaxed and low-key pattern. Moving up all the way, party would be the most intense pattern with the most activity and excitement. There's a bit of information here with each of these patterns. So here you'll see MIDI, CC35, if we're under still, and OSC live/1/pattern/index. We'll talk about this a little later, but as an overview, this is the MIDI control message, this MIDI CC35, and this is the OSC control message to trigger that pattern in the first fixture group. This MIDI CC35 is the control change that is used to change the patterns in live control from a MIDI controller. And this 0 here means if you send it MIDI CC35 with a value of 0, you will pick the Maestro still pattern on the first fixture group. And the same with OSC. If you send this OSC message with a value of 0, you will pick the still pattern on the first fixture group. And if you want to pick beam pattern or ambient pattern, you just have to send the value that coincides with that pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So those are the Maestro patterns. Those are the intelligent, autonomous patterns that work with music and listen to music and drive the lights based on the music. Okay, let's focus in on one of the fixture groups and run some of the patterns and see what they do. So let's go over to the ACL mover fixture group. And I'm going to actually just isolate this fixture group so we can see what it's doing. So on the other fixture groups, I'm just going to send the brightness to 0. Here we go. And then this is the only fixture group that's now running on the stage. If I run the still pattern, I'm presented with a brightness parameter. And that pattern and the still pattern is just going to be changing colors based on transitions of the music. It's not going to move the movers, and the lighting design is going to be relatively static. It's just going to change color. So it's a really simple pattern that you can use for more gentle backdrops. Now let's jump over to, say, dance pattern, for instance. So dance pattern, now you can see, has a number of parameters associated with it. So it has the brightness, has excitement level, background, mover range, and mover speed. Let me play some music and we can kind of see what this pattern is doing. Okay, now you can see it started moving around. and I can make it, I can get the pixels to be a bit more exciting by turning up the excitement parameter. And you'll see there's a bit more dynamic in the pixels. I can also decrease the background. And now I've got a lot more contrast in the lighting and it's getting a lot more flashy. I'll put that back up, put the excitement down a bit. I can also limit the mover range here. So if now they're not going to move very much at all. And I can also play with the mover speed. Let's jack the mover speed up. So now they're going to move a lot faster. Or I can take the mover speed down to 0 and they won't move at all. Okay, I'll kill the music and then they will just go to rest as the music cuts out. So that shows you all the different parameters for a Maestro pattern like dance. Most of the Maestro patterns have similar parameters. If I go to party, it's the same parameter set. If I go to energetic, it's the same parameter set that will work the same way. And and then with beam, it's more of a limited parameter set because it's a simpler pattern. And then with still, even more limited, you only get brightness because there's no movement. So I encourage you to play around with these different patterns and keep in mind that as the patterns go up, they get more energetic and have more activity in the movement and dimming of the pixels. So party pattern will be the craziest pattern with the most amount of movement. And however, you say if you like party the way it is, but it's a little too frenetic, you can calm it down by just pulling down the excitement, maybe turning up the background so there's not as much contrast between the pixels turning on and off, and you can subdue it a little bit, but it will in general have a bit more activity than the other patterns. So to close off Maestro patterns, you'll notice that here underneath the parameters, there are a few other things. So there's allow music-based blackout. And what that does is it's going to somewhat randomly turn off that fixture group when the beat drops out. So if I have this toggled on, say, this fixture group, not all the time, but sometimes when the beat drops out, that whole fixture group is going to black out. So that enables a bit more dynamic in your lighting effects across fixture groups, if you like that. I encourage you to experiment with it. You can also click on this tooltip to get a bit more of a description of how it works. We also have blackout on silence. So if I hit this blackout on silence, you're going to see these fixtures with these gobos turn off. So because I have no audio going into the system, it's perceiving silence on this fixture group and it turned it off. So you can toggle blackout on silence for whichever fixture groups you want, and those fixtures will turn off when the music stops. And then there's some advanced parameters. So if we click down here, you have control over your trigger buttons for each fixture group. So for instance, on this first fixture group, if you don't want it to strobe when you hit the strobe button, you just press that off. Same goes for the blackout, the blinder, the fog, and the effect. If for whatever reason you don't want those effects to trigger on that fixture group, you can just toggle it off. So if I go over to my second fixture group, I'll also see that I have those same toggles here. And then you will see also under advanced parameters, there's a few more parameters that you can play around with to dial in the effects of your show. This is really for advanced users. If you want to have more control over your Maestro patterns, you can mess around with these parameters and kind of see what they do. Okay, so that pretty much concludes Maestro patterns. Let's move on to core patterns. Okay, so if I click on here and scroll down, I'll see the core patterns. So core patterns are different than Maestro patterns in that Maestro patterns are fully autonomous, intelligent patterns that listen to music and create lighting effects based on the music and changes in the music. Maestro patterns also change color based on the music using color palette groups. Contrary to that, core patterns are way simpler. They can or cannot react to music. So that's an important thing to remember. If you do want to have effects that are not based on music, you can use core patterns, whereas Maestro patterns require music to run. Core patterns also don't change color palettes the way Maestro patterns do. They'll just stay on one color palette. So if you give it a color palette group, it will pick one of the individual palettes from that group and just use that for the duration of the cue. And core patterns also don't change their effects based on the contents of the music. They will stay relatively static in the way it works. Core patterns are really good to use as sort of background patterns, or patterns where you want your fixture group to perhaps be a bit less active and you have a lot more control over what it does. So there are a number of core patterns. There are solid color, which is just really great for putting solid color of your choosing onto the lights, and you can make it move a little bit if you like. So we can show you that. So why don't I go to solid color? I'm going to turn the brightness down on all the fixture groups except the fourth one, just so we can isolate that group and see how it works. Let's turn the brightness down here, here, and here. So now we only have our wash group up here on the truss. So if I go select solid color, you can see that, oops, I got the wrong group there. So let's go to my static wash group, hit solid color. And it's currently on the solid color and rainbow group, and it's just picked out one of the individual palettes from that group, and it won't move around that group. It will just stay on that palette. So why don't we go and pick a different individual palette? If I keep scrolling down, we'll get into the individual palettes, and I'll go over color palettes in a lot more detail in a bit here. Let's pick this Galaxy color palette. Okay, so we've got solid color on the Galaxy individual palette on the lights. And here I have some parameters. So I have brightness, I have speed, which will change the speed of the palming of the lights. I have color select, so that helps me pick the color that I want from the gradient up here. I can go from blue over here to the purple over on that side. I can also change the depth of the effect and the phase to get it to move around the room a bit more left or right. So that's solid color. I can also go to the wash pattern. So the wash pattern is a pattern that works with audio or not audio. So if I click wash here, you can see that there's an audio reactive toggle down there. So if I turn that toggle off, I can get that wash pattern to move through different color stops within this gradient with a certain speed. And then I can kind of change, and then I can change how much the color is shifting across that gradient with the color shift. And then I can smooth out the transitions between the changes as well. So you can see that the lights are changing. If this is on audio activity mode, and I don't have any audio running at the moment, it will change color within this gradient based on the beat of the music. And you can select the division or multiple of the beat based on speed. So basically the higher the speed, the quicker on the beat the lights will change. And the lower the speed, the slower on the beat. So maybe every bar or every 2 bars the lights will change. Moving on, we've got spectrum. So spectrum is audio active as well if you want it to be. I'll turn it off for now. So the audio activity's off, and I've got some movement in the light. So I got speed. I can make this turn the speed up. You can play with the energy. That changes the color and brightness of the lights. Contrast is like background. So this has got a high contrast right now. It's like background, but it's inverted. So the higher the contrast, the less background. I know it's a bit confusing. Lower the contrast, the less contrast you have in the lights. And we've got an attack parameter and a decay or wave width. So that's just another way to play around with the effect. Down here is something called shape. So I can make the effect move forward or make it move backwards. I can mirror the effect. So if I hit mirror, you'll see it's mirroring. And I can also make it go random. What I'm going to do in a bit is I'll show you this same pattern on a 2D grid of lights, and then you can see some of the other shapes. It's actually really cool. So we've also got Starry Sky, similar to Spectrum, but a slightly different effect. Another pattern called Twinkle. And then we've got Chases. So let's dive into Chase a little bit here. Okay, so Chase pattern here has audio activity on or off. So right now you can see it's chasing around the stage. So let's see here. So we've got speed of those chases. Let's bring it down a bit. We've also got trigger, which is how often new chases get triggered. Right here. And then we've got contrast, the inversion of background. So we can turn the contrast up. We can turn the contrast down or up if we want more of a chase effect. And then we've got attack and width. So width is how many lights are in that chase, basically. So here I've just managed to get it to just be one light that's moving slowly. And I can change the direction by hitting the shape. So I can make it go backwards. I can also make it mirror. So yeah, that's how you can use the chase pattern. Lots of options there. All right, and then moving on here, we've got flashbang, which is kind of like a strobe pattern, but when it's audio reactive, flashbangs, flashes, or strobes get triggered by the kick drum. If there's no kick drum, they'll get triggered by just onsets in the audio. So that would be like a snare drum or a clap or something like that, some salient feature in the audio. So it's kind of like an intelligent strobe of sorts. We also have mapping test, which is the way to test if your fixtures are laid out properly. So you can see here, if I put on mapping test and turn up the speed, you can see that my fixtures are in fact moving sequentially left to right, showing me that the map of the fixtures is correct. I can change the width as well here. And then finally there's blackout, which just blacks out all the lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to a 2D stage, and I can show you how some of these patterns, core patterns, look in a 2D environment, which is actually pretty cool. So I'm just going to load that up. Go over to my stage. I have a 2D stage loaded. So this stage has just got 169 slim pars with a 2D mapping here. It's using a wrap with a segment length of 13. So there's 13 lights across here, and they're wrapping around to create a grid. Okay, so yeah, the way you set up a 2D grid is by selecting 2D here, using a wrap style, depending on how you've wired your lights and or addressed your lights. And then your segment length, which is essentially the length of one of your rows. And then back over here in show, and we'll turn up the brightness. And let's go to spectrum. Turn off audio activity. And all of a sudden you can see the spectrum pattern in 2D. So if I pick like a radial, for example, these patterns start to look really cool in T2D. And you can play around with them, get some neat 2D effects. Radial goes outwards, radial reverse goes inwards, and there's also spiral, which looks like that. Super cool. And then I can jump over to, let's say twinkle and see what that looks like. Okay, so it's twinkling away. I'll turn the decay down a little bit here so they bounce around a bit more obviously. Turn up the contrast. And then I can make them go out radially, or I can mirror them, or make them go radial reverse. So there's lots of options here. Can do the same, say for Starry Sky. I'll tweak some of the parameters here to get it to work. Okay, so there's Starry Sky. I had to turn the speed up a little bit. As you can see, you can get some pretty fun effects here. All right, we're going to now jump over to talking about color palettes. And you can see I have reloaded my previous stage with all my fixture groups. There are two categories of color palettes. There are grouped color palettes. And then if we scroll down, there are individual color palettes. There's a third one that's very similar to individual palettes called extended palettes. And if we scroll way down, you'll see extended channel palettes. So individual palettes and extended palettes are just exactly that. They're individual palettes of color, either solid color or gradients. The extended channel palettes give you UV, amber, or white channels in addition to the regular RGB color gradient. And going right to the top again, color palette groups or grouped palettes are simply just groups of individual and or extended palettes. And as we talked about previously, Maestro works really well with color palette groups because it intelligently picks the different color palettes within that group based on changes in the music. Whereas core patterns just use one individual or extended palette to work. So it's pretty straightforward to just go ahead and pick your palettes for your group however you need them. And as of software version 1.4.1, you can now create color palettes, both individual and color palette groups. So let's go ahead and play around with that. So if I click on these three dots, I can add a palette. I can let's call it New York. I'm going to add a color. So what's New York? I don't know. It makes me think kind of dark blue. So I can move this around to get my first color stop. If I want extended channels, I can add them down here. I can add another color. So maybe let's add in a red. Oh no, oops. That was my first stop. So down here on my second stop, I can add in a red. So now I've got blue on one side, a red on the other side. I can add another color. Maybe I'll add a bit of a green. I don't know if New York is these colors. I just thought of New York. So now I've created 3 color stops and it's created a gradient with those color stops. I can also ask Maestro to help me create color stops. So if I delete these 2 color stops, I can start with my blue and I can click this compatible color palette thing here. And it will give me the option for color palettes that will look good with that blue, according to color theory. So I can pick colors that work well with blue, that are similar to blue, or sit at different places on the color wheel to get nice color mixtures. Got my blue here, and I'm going to add some compatible colors. So let's add purple, and then also let's add some nice light blue. Okay, so now I've created a color palette. I can save it. And you'll notice it's saved under user. So if I take off system palettes, I have my user New York palette here. And similar to patterns, palettes can also be selected through MIDI and OSC using the information here. So this one is available on Control Change 36 with a value of 109 and on this OSC message with a value of 109. I can edit that palette if I want, get the menu back up. And in the same way I created that, I can also create a palette group. So if I click here and add palette group, call it my awesome group. I now have access to all my palettes, system and user palettes. My user palette's there, and I can search the palettes here. Let's find a green. I can add that to my group. It will pop up down here. Maybe I want a white. It will pop up here. Let's look for purple. Purple thermometer is cool. Add it here. You can kind of see how that works. So now I'm adding my colors to my group. I can save it. And again, under user, here is my awesome group. And then I can simply add that to my Maestro pattern. And now it's running my awesome group with these colors. Yeah, so that's how creation of color palettes works. It's pretty straightforward, and there's a really neat way to observe all the different color palettes in your groups here and to see what they look like. All right. So now that we've got an idea of how color palettes work, we'll move on to effects palettes. So we do have really in-depth tutorials on how effects palettes work. So I'm just quickly going to cover them here. I do encourage you to learn all about effects palettes. I think we have a couple videos about them. And I'll link a bunch of the supporting videos in the description of this video. So I'll make a quick effects palette. So I've already created some snapshots on the control page. If I jump over to control, and then I see that I've got this snapshot called mover gobos only. So if I hit that, you'll see that these Mac movers now turn on with this specific gobo, and that's all that's on the stage. I can take that preview off. I can also go to this movers cake snapshot, and that moves all the movers to the cake. I'm not going to get into how I made these snapshots. That's in other videos. I also have a washes off snapshot, which turns these washes up here off. There you go. So now jumping back over to show page, I can go into my effects palettes. Okay, so I'm going to add an effects palette, call it new effects palette. Going to include a snapshot, say movers gobo only on silence. So when there's silence, then my stage is going to just have those Mac moving heads with the gobo I selected. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to activate it. Okay, so I've only selected that effects palette on that fixture group. For that full effect to work, I need to select it on all the fixture groups. So I'm going to go ahead and select it here, and select it here, and also select it here. I'll go back to my first group. So now you can see that that snapshot that I created that changes all the fixtures on the stage is now activated because I've added the effects palette on all the fixture groups. Okay, so I can also go in and edit my effects palette and add another snapshot here, turn the washes off when there's no kick drum. So when the kick drum hits, those washes will turn on. So I'll save that. And I have to go and so I'll save that. So if I play some music there without a kick drum, those washes will be off, and when the kick drum hits, those washes will turn on just to create some more dynamic. Okay, I'm not going to go much further into effects palettes, but this is where you select your effects palettes. You have to make sure you add them for each of the fixture groups you want them to operate on. And you just like palettes, patterns and palettes, you can select them in live mode using MIDI and Open Sound Control. I'm going to show you a little example of how I built this static cue here. So I'm just going to delete it, and we're going to rebuild it, just showing you how I did it, because a lot of people like to use static cues. So let's say I want a static cue where all the lights are the same color. Really simple cue. I'm going to pick solid color for my first group. Let's go with a purple, because I like purple. And I'm not going to have an effects palette. I also don't want it to be moving around. I just want it to be static. So I turn the depth down on solid color. And then I'm going to do the same thing on all the other groups. So here I go. Okay, so now I have all of my fixture groups essentially set to the same pattern, palette, no effects palette, and settings. And now I can save that cue. So I'm going to hit save as. It's now going to save it down here. I'll call it static Q1. And then I can also change its timing. So currently it's set to play for 45 seconds, but I'm going to hit edit here. I'm going to set it to infinite length. So when I play this cue, just like that, it will just play forever until I do something else. I'm actually going to move it to the top of my list. Okay, so that shows you how to create a cue and save it to your show. And then once cues are added to the show, you can also go in and edit those cues. So I can go in and now edit my static cue by hitting these three dots and hit edit cue. And I get a similar interface to live control. and I can go in and make changes to each of my fixture groups. I can change the duration, the name, can also change the transition time into that cue. Keep in mind that as I make changes here, they won't show up on your stage unless I hit this preview button. So if you're messing around here and you're like, nothing's changing, you have to hit this preview button. Okay, I'll close that. You can also duplicate cues and delete them here. And you can also use this add new cue button to build a cue and save it to your show. So there's a few ways to do the same thing. Okay, so Maestro has the ability to run multiple shows, as we already talked about. So to switch between those shows, you just hit the drop down and select that show. You can also select shows from MIDI and OSC, similar to how we talked about previously, using these commands and these values. And you can also add new shows by hitting add new here and building a new show however you want it to be. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about MIDI and OSC. So you can actually use MIDI to trigger these cues, which a lot of people do. A typical basic MIDI setup would be a controller that triggers these cues and also triggers some of these effects trigger buttons for live performance. If you want to create your own interface to control Maestro that's customized to you, you can use TouchOSC. So let me bring that up. So over here, this is our TouchOSC Maestro interface. So this is available on our support page under the OSC section, and it just shows you kind of another version of the app, but it's customizable to use how you want to use it. So here we have live show and triggers, and you can actually go in and edit this interface however you like. So TouchOSC allows you to go in and change any of these position of these elements in the UI. I know this is a bit more advanced, but for those people who want to get into interface design for Maestro, this is how you do it. I can show you another example of an interface. So this one actually gives you kind of like a MIDI controller view, which you could use on a tablet or a phone or a laptop. So these cues are actually connected to the cues in Maestro. And again, you can edit this and go in and build it however you want to build it. At some point in the future, we will publish a video that talks about how to build your own TouchOSC interfaces, but there's lots of resources on the internet for that. Okay, and then basically one final thing is if you have a show that you want to save, you can click on these three dots here and you can download the show right here, and then you can re-upload the show using add show. So that's handy if you want to save your shows or swap or trade shows with your friends. And then finally, we have transport controls here for controlling the show. So I can stop the show by hitting this stop button. I can play the show. I can also pause the show to freeze the lights in a specific state. And then I can also jump between cues. So you'll see the cues jumping forward and backwards. And you can control these parameters from MIDI and OSC as well. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. This was a long one, and I hope that gives you a relatively in-depth explanation of how the show page works. Please check out all of our other YouTube tutorial videos because they will definitely help you get the most out of MaestroDMX so you can dial in your shows just how you want. Great. Thank you so much for your support and all the love, and we'll talk soon.